Greetings again, and welcome to part 3 on our short series, the podcast series on the Prince. And this is Rebecca McCarthy for English 102 online at South Seattle Community College. I'm going to go ahead and pick up where I left off. The next section you're reading about talks about liberality and meanness. Now, often, and it depending upon which translation you're reading, either the translation I gave you or one that you found on your own, this idea of being liberal is not how we view the term today. Rather, what Machiavelli is basically talking about is one's generosity. And he says that generosity, in a way, is a quality that is quite beloved in people, and it's something we often admire. However, generosity itself can be quite bad for a prince, because a prince, if he is too generous, will do things such as forget to tax his people. He could become poor, give away all that he has, and his generosity could lead to a state falling apart. Rather, it becomes okay for a prince to have a reputation of being mean. Indeed, Machiavelli writes, and I quote, "We have not seen great things done in our time except by those who have been considered mean. The rest failed." That's a huge statement he's making. He's saying that we don't need to be generous as a ruler, and that necessarily isn't a good quality for a ruler to have. Indeed, he looks at whether or not it is better to be loved or feared. And on this topic, Machiavelli writes, "Upon this question arises whether it is better to be loved than feared or feared than loved. It may be answered that one should wish to be both, but because it is difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved when, on the chill, either must be dispensed with." So, in general, he's taking, if you will, a rather shrewd opinion of rulership, right? It's nice to be loved, but the truth is it's better to be feared if that allows you to take care of business the way it needs to be taken care of. The key, however, is that a prince needs to inspire fear in such a way that if he does not win the love of his people, he at least avoids the hatred of his people. Now, remember, he spoke about this earlier, especially about needing the people's support in order to retain rulership. It is important to have people feel that they are getting something out of the deal, of this particular deal of rulership or somebody as a particular prince. If the people hate you, they don't feel that they're getting anything out of the deal, then you as a prince will fail. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about getting something out of the deal as we go on, especially when we talk about Gramsci and his definition of hegemony. But I'm going to give it to you real quickly because this is an idea I would like you to think about a great deal. Hegemony is a forced rule, but one in which people concede to because they think they're getting something out of the deal. And that's basically what Machiavelli is suggesting here. So how do you make sure that if the people don't love you, that they at least don't hate you? This is a question that Machiavelli takes up, and he has some very important, I'd say, pretty much right-on practical pieces of advice. First thing he suggests is not to steal the citizenship's property, because that would piss off citizens. Not to steal subjects or even men's women. That generally, you got to keep your hands off their property whenever it's possible to do so. Machiavelli also looks at the way in which princes should keep their faith. And when I say faith, I mean spiritual faith as well. Now, indeed, this chapter is kind of interesting because almost more so than any other chapters in the book, this chapter offended a great many people because Machiavelli examines the concept of faith from a practicality rather than an ideal nature. And to this end, Machiavelli wrote, "Nevertheless, our experience has been that those princes who have done great things have held great faith in little account and have known how to circumvent the intellect of men by craft and in the end have overcome those who have relied on their word." So he's kind of throwing to the wind this whole idea that you have to hold faith, that you have to be a man of faith, that you have to listen to men of intellect or educated men, and that you're able to also dismiss your word, that you don't have to keep your word to the citizenship if circumstances calls for you to break your word. Now, he uses an interesting metaphor. Machiavelli suggests that rulership act like a fox in order to discover the snares and a lion to terrify the wolves. If this means that one must fake their faith, their religious views, in order to gain leadership of their people, then that is exactly what he or she must do. Remember, the aim of the prince is to maintain and protect his or her principality. And so any or most any methods that one use in order to achieve these goals are pretty much okay. And at least that is according to Machiavelli. However, Machiavelli again understands that people are often put off by this particular attitude, the pretending of faith. And so he advises something very interesting. He advises that a prince must disguise his characteristics, his true character, and to find out how to become a great pretender instead, in order to achieve any means needed in order to have success. In the end, Machiavelli would like a prince to have all of the good qualities, but it is far more important to look like one has those good qualities. Appearances is the key. If the citizenship thinks that you have all these wonderful virtues, then they are likely to believe that it is so, and so, in the end, princesses must keep up appearances. Now, that's all I'm going to go over specifically about the readings, but I want to take a few minutes and talk very briefly about how all these ideas given to us by Machiavelli might apply to other topics besides state rule. And I want us to remember that often when we are looking at these readings, although most of them focuses on the idea of big brother versus little brother in the realm of state rule, that they can easily be applied to many different circumstances. Let's take, for example, this idea of parents and children. And I'm just going to kind of go down some of the main points of Machiavelli in his reading and compare it to situations that might be not necessarily thought of regarding parents and children. Now, one of the first things that Machiavelli talks about is that hereditary principalities are easier to rule than new ones. Now, consider this in the realm of parenthood. If you have given birth to your own child, there is a good chance that it's going to be easier for you as a parent than if you have adopted a child or if you inherited a child by marriage. Here is a way we can compare some of the same qualities that Machiavelli is talking about to an entirely different situation. And if we continue upon this mode, and especially about whether or not parents can be truly virtuous, let's look at this at a very logical way. Ideally, in our world, we often say that parents need to have certain virtues and they should uplift to those virtues all the time. Not only does this allow us to avoid being hypocrites, but it allows us to give good measure and examples for our children to watch and emulate and then grow up, hopefully, to emulate well. But we all know that as human beings, just as Machiavelli points out, we are not 100% virtuous all the times. And many times we do not show our best means. So we have learned often as adults and as mentors to put on appearances, if you will. And is this a bad thing? Well, I don't necessarily think it is. For example, I, as a teacher, may be having a very bad day. I may hate grading. I am tired of answering the same question over and over again, so on and so forth. I may even be feeling like, I want to give up teaching forever. But instead of allowing my students to see that side of myself, I choose to put on appearances. So I answer the same question over and over again with happiness and with delight in my voice. And I may even act like I am happy and joyful to grade everybody's work, for example. I don't know what else to use. But as you can see, putting up appearances is important. And our parents do that too. Often when they are short or they are tired, they will also put on appearances. But our parents will also lie to us in their circumstances if they think particularly it will either protect us, will help us, or will teach us a lesson. For example, sometimes a parent will tell you that your dog, who has recently died, really went to go live on a farm someplace in Montana, right? Why would they tell this kind of white lie? Well, depending upon our age, maybe we are not prepared to deal with the concept of death yet. And so, in order to better wait until our maturity level is at a place where we can understand this concept, our parents decide to lie to us in order to put off that moment of disclosure. So, as you can see, many elements that Machiavelli talks about regarding how a leader needs to rule his people can also be applied to many different topics as well. So when you are writing your papers, I want you to think not necessarily in this narrow vision of understanding of what Machiavelli is saying regarding principalities and princes, but I want you to see how can you take these concepts and relate them to your own topics, especially if those topics don't seem like they immediately relate. Because chances are the overall symbology and the overall general rules and discussions that Machiavelli bring up will probably have some kind of related points to the topics that you are writing about in your own papers as well. So always look for those interconnections. Ask yourself this question: how can I apply this to my paper and my topic? Is it logical? Is it beneficial for me to do so? If yes, then I'm going to go ahead and add it in my paper. If no, then of course I'm going to look elsewhere. And that sums up our short 3-part series on the Prince and Machiavelli. I hope that you found this to be an aid to your reading. Remember, there is a wonderful podcast of somebody who reads much better than me, reading all of the Prince, and I advise that you take the time to listen to that as well. Until next time, I'll see you on the boards, and goodbye.